Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be launching this year's annual leadership conference for culture and sports. And today's panel is going to kickstart the entire day of learning. My name is Julie Dill. I spent more than a decade in sports talk radio and sports television. And now I get to tell businesses stories and help them grow and connect with new fans. I'm excited today to have this conversation with three experts. We all know that in today's fast-paced world of high-performance sports, the pressure to deliver can be exhausting and really has never been higher. Generally, those weighty pressures, though, hang on athletes, coaches, and organizations. But as records shatter and new human limits are seemingly set, shouldn't we always be asking an underlying question? How do we ensure the well-being of our athletes, protect the integrity of victory, and build organizations that stand the test of time? Well, this webinar delves into those underlying challenges and, frankly, those dilemmas that are all at the intersection of performance, ethics, and sustainability. So please join our panel of world-class experts as they discuss strategies to balance the pursuit of excellence with the obligation to safeguard the human spirit, honor competition, and of course, honor the legacy of sports organizations. So this opening session serves as a foundational stepping stone, setting the tone for our subsequent discussions to build sustainable cultures in high-performance sports. And we're discussing specifically how to honor and protect athletes, victory, and organizations. I'm honored to have three panelists that span the sports world. We have Lee Lambert, Chancellor and CEO for Foothill De Anza Community College District. The man has been in multiple states, so I'm sure the NFC West battles going on in the NFL right now are a little challenging for him to decide his loyalties. We also have Chima Okolia. He's a former Penn State football standout and now legal recruiter and professor of NIL, names, images, and likenesses at Boston College. And last but certainly not least, we're so excited to have Riley Rodriguez. She's a journalism student at USC, a club athlete, and can lend us a lot of insights into what's currently going on in the athlete's mind and heart. So let's start this conversation. Chima, I'm going to go to you first because it seems that not only were you also an athlete, but now you are at sort of ground zero of a new world for athletes and those, again, pressures to perform as well as monetize their names and likeness. So Chima, would you mind giving us a little background on yourself first, just so our audience can understand, and then jump into the question of what do you think are the top three things athletes need to do to protect themselves in the current market?
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Chima Okolie. I'm very happy to be here. I'm a former Penn State football player. I also had a cup of coffee with the Seattle Seahawks. So I've seen it from almost every single level. But right now, being a professor of NIL, you're seeing, well, maybe I'll just kind of lay out the current landscape and then we'll dive into the three things if that's okay. You're seeing the pressure to perform exacerbated now because the money is above board, right? There were times where nobody's naive here. There's always been cash flowing through college sports, but it was kind of a hush-hush thing. Now, everyone knows that you have an XYZ deal with XYZ company and you better, make that pass or, try your best. And, so I'll see a couple things that I'm seeing. First, for athletes, they have to remember that they are not, the numbers are strongly against them getting a huge NIL deal. Those things are talked about way more than they're actually received. Second of all, if you're at a school, let's say you're at a Big Ten institution, ACC institution, or wherever on a little bit of scholarship, you'll appreciate it later because that education that you're going to get, where it's going to take you is still really valuable, and don't lose sight of that. And then thirdly, if you're not performing in your sport, this quote unquote NIL value that everyone thinks they have, Julie, people would never be self-important. I know you're shocked at that, right? But everybody thinks they have a lot more value than they do. So until you prove it in the field or in the pool and in the classroom, you have to do a lot of things before you unlock it. I always say that this whole NIL thing, it's more of a bonus. It's like ice cream after dinner. Do you get what I'm saying? And many, many athletes, Division II, Division III, they're just happy to get a little bit of scholarship money. So that's just kind of the current landscape. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for laying that out. It's very interesting that the NIL deals could actually apply more pressure on athletes because that money is now front and center. And yet, I also love the point you made that it's also a lot harder to get than people might think. So we'll dive into that a little bit more in a bit. Lee, thanks so much for joining us. Wanted to get your thoughts on from an institutional standpoint, because as Chima was pointing to, a lot of athletes come into various levels of sports, and I know you're at the community college level, but in charge of a district of community colleges, so facing a lot of diversity in your challenges. What's it like at an institutional level to make sure that your athletes are performing at their highest and yet feel protected and, you know, maximizing their opportunities as well?
Well, good morning, everybody. Great to be on here with you, and thanks for the question, Julie. First, I'll say I'm a Seahawks fan. Spent most of my life in this Washington State. I've been a CEO of now 3 community college districts. So I'm coming at this from that community college level. So let me first say that. Also, many of our students, as you all know, will not go on to transfer to a university to continue their sports. And then far fewer of them will ever make it to the professional level as well. And why I say all that is where to put the emphasis. And we say a lot about the student athlete, et cetera, but we have to remember they're a student and they are human beings. And we should never forget that. And so I emphasize for my ADs that I expect academic performance as much as athletic performance, because it's the education that will take you far further than the athletics will ever do. So I wanted to set that. The other thing is, for other CEOs, you set the expectations, you keep holding people accountable, you model the way, and please respond to complaints. The buck stops with you.
That's really interesting and echoes what Chima was saying too, right? That actually academic performance is going to serve any collegiate athlete far better through life than their athletic performance, although the athletic performance gets the majority of the prestige and acclaim. Riley, let's bring you in here now, darling, as we're discussing that balancing act between being a student and an athlete and being able to having to prioritize that. And Chima, I'm going to go back to you after Riley answers to see if there's any difference from Riley's generation to your generation. There's a couple of years between you two. But Riley, how do you guys currently balance that performance metrics, if you want to call it, of having to make sure that you're sticking to your grades, you're making sure you're getting your education, but also pursuing athletic goals and or dreams of something more?
Thank you so much for having me. So I do play for the USC Women's Club basketball team. And for me, I mean, time management is always a big factor that comes into play, both balancing school and balancing basketball. And for me, I always try to stay on top of what is due during just that week and try to focus on what is due the next day and kind of like going through the motions of making sure that I have a list of like what I need to do, and also along with emailing my teachers when needed and when I need help for anything, just in case I fall behind. So that is really, especially being a journalism major, I have to do interviews with people. So that kind of, I have to make sure that I have time to do an interview and then have time to look at the interview and then edit the video and then do stuff like that. So it's been challenging, but it's definitely been something that I've been able to adapt to.
That's awesome. I love that you put the short-term focus, make sure you're getting done what needs to get done, prioritizing there appropriately. And then also that open communication with your teachers and the administration. That is so important. And I think that, Lee, you'd probably agree that that open communication is critical for everyone's success, whether it's on a sports team or in academics. Chima, what do you think when you were at Penn State, and obviously that's a major football program, you were a starter on the offensive line. How did you balance being a collegiate athlete as well as getting multiple degrees in college?
I think the answer is at times not well, but you just figure it out because in I was at Penn State, especially at that time, academics was prioritized. You know, every institution, every program, I should say, doesn't value the athletic or the personal time, Riley, right, of their athletes as much, right? Your coach is not necessarily going to bed at night like, man, how can we get Riley more free time, right? They just have a lot to think about, and then you yourself, you also have a lot to do. So, you know, an example is during the winter, nobody thinks about football in January in Pennsylvania. It's freezing cold. It's not a great place to be. But you have to be up 5 o'clock to work out, and then you have to go to breakfast, and then you have to go to your first class. And then maybe let's say you're injured, you got to rehab. There's so many things you have to do that your time, it's kind of managed for you. So that like 15% that you might get during a week, you kind of want to take it to yourself, but you still must plan for the next week, right? So there's always a lot of pressures, and you know these are young people, so they're not always adept to handling a full schedule, and sometimes it feels like you never really get adept to handling a full schedule. But a lot of pressure is placed upon them, especially if maybe they're a more heralded recruit that's going to turn the program around. You also have that societal pressure, so it's a lot to balance outside of school and outside of your sport too.
Yeah, and that's such a great point, because what I was hearing from all three of you is that right now that it seems that when we're talking about honoring the athletes and protecting the athletes, it seems like the athlete, especially at the collegiate level, has to be aware that they have to protect themselves first and foremost. And then hopefully there's some protections for them at the institutional level, you know, such as great mentors, letting them know that their education is key and that not focusing every ounce of their energy on the field, but also keeping that balance. So Dr. or Lee, I'll go to you for this question. How much do you think the athlete's responsible for protecting themselves and maintaining that balance between real life and pursuing athletic success as well as academic success? And how much do you think the pressure should be on the institutions to make sure that there are safeguards around those athletes?
Well, so my dad always taught us that no one's going to care as much about you as you. So depending on how much you care about yourself will help you dictate how that works. So let me just say that. So I think you always have to keep in mind your own self regard and well-being. You have to come at it from that lens. And then as you do that, I think use that as a guide to help you choose where you end up going, because you should be in an institution that does put you first in terms of your well-being, and ferret that out. Ask those kinds of questions of the recruiters and of the programs, because if you don't do that, then you're going to be in a situation where they're going to dictate the terms. Now, I wasn't, I didn't compete at the collegiate level, but I was in the Army. And so I was in the Army where, your time is structured out for you much of the day, especially during basic training and AIT. So that time pressure where you don't have it for yourself, I get that. And so the athlete's got to figure out how to balance that, but not lose sight of, you got to take care of yourself, because no one else is necessarily going to be looking after you, especially if you're no longer of the same value to the institution as you might have been going into that organization.
That's a great point, and it's a real reality that I think can be shocking to a lot of collegiate athletes as they pursue college sports, and then probably even more shocking when they go from a college where maybe they were a star into the pros where maybe it's a cup of coffee and that's as good as it gets, So there are so many different angles to approach that from. We only have 3 more minutes left of this webinar. So again, our apologies to our audience for the earlier technical difficulties, but I want to get to now shifting a little bit from focusing on the athletes to now the institutions and protecting organizations, Penn State, USC, and I think a lot of great community colleges have brand recognition, and that's taken a lot of years to develop over time. So let's start with you, Chima, on this one. What do you think are some keys? And again, we're limited on time, but what do you think are some keys to an organization protecting their own sort of brand recognition while also protecting athletes and honoring them?
Yeah, so I think that those two things are going to be at conflict a lot of the time, because sometimes the wants and needs of the athletes are directly opposed to what the program might want. So I think programs have to make an honest effort to listen to the athletes first and foremost. So many decisions are made for athletes, for the benefit of athletes, but very often talking to the athletes about what they want will at least give you a genuine picture of the things that they could see improved. And the best programs I've been a part of, teams that I've been around, there's a buy-in from both players to coaches, program to players, back and forth. So I think that creating very intentional ways to generate player feedback is the very base level that all that should come from.
Awesome. I love that. What a great point. It's real too. Those interests could be at odds, and it takes real leadership to create that simpatico. Lee, let's go to you now. What do you think are some real keys, maybe the top 3 keys to ensuring institutional success?
Well, one, always focus on what it's all about. It's the mission of the institution. For us, it's about student success, and that means putting that student at the front and center of everything we do. I think secondly, you model the way, meaning if what kind of organization do you really want to be reflects the personality of the leadership, and that leadership must be always about success and accountability for everyone. And the third thing is to remember, we are a pathway to better opportunity. So the education is front and center for that, and never lose sight of it.
Love that. Pathway to opportunity. Isn't that the case? All right, Riley, last but not least, let's close this out with some profound wisdom from you. What do you think is really important to make sure that institutions maintain their honor and protect athletes as well as themselves?
Honestly, I think just being able to be diverse in a lot of aspects, and kind of be able to attend to all of the students in just like ways of just like events and also like athletics and stuff like that. And I feel like once you have a diverse school, like a diverse aspect of it towards their students, I think that'll just and especially their athletes, I feel like that will make the institution better overall, and also make it so that more people could see that our institution, like USC, such as can attend to so many different students on so many different levels on a wide spectrum. And I feel like that would be just a better way for institutions to develop their students and that.
Great point. I hear you saying, be real.
Right,
Be
right.
real. You know, everybody has different needs at various parts of life,
Right,
and
right.
we have to address those honestly and openly. Thank you so much, everyone. I feel like this was a great conversation. It could last a lot longer, obviously, but unfortunately, we have to hand it off to the next panelist in this awesome full day seminar.